What's going on, everyone? This is Brian, author of Healer of the Water Monster, and I have here today with me Shaun Taylor-Corbett. Is that how you say your name?
Yeah, Shaun Taylor-Corbett. Yeah.
Corbett. Okay.
Yeah.
um, yeah, he is the voice actor for Healer of the Water Monster, and um, I just got to say I'm so happy to have worked with you throughout this entire process, and just again, thank you for all the extra work that you put into creating the characters and also learning the Navajo.
Yeah, to you, man. And for teaching me, and guiding me and giving me lessons.
All right,
Perfect.
so first question I have for you is how did you get involved with voice acting?
It's incredible. I've been an actor for a long time, stage acting and some TV and film as well. But I have a great friend, Kyla Garcia, and she works with an incredible audiobook company called DN Audio in Los Angeles. And through a native theater company that I work with called Native Voices at the Autry, they did an audition call, and about 15 of us went to DN Audio, put ourselves on tape, didn't think anything of it, read maybe 5 pages from a book, did a few characters, and then 2 years later, out of nowhere, I get a call um, to be one of the voices in Tommy Orange's There There. And it was like, that was my first book. Can you believe it? I was like, wait, what? It was four narrators,
Yeah, yeah,
I believe yeah, Alma
yeah.
Cuevo. I might pronounce her name wrong, but Hyla Garcia and Daryl Dennis and myself. And it really changed my life in terms of voice acting. I didn't do that many books right after that, but it led me to meeting other great people who gave me other great books, and it got me started. But that was the most pivotal book that I started with, and I went on a journey. It was nominated for an Audie Award, so it was like my first book, and I was like, oh man, what is going on? It was beautiful, but I fell in love with the art form, and slowly I've been accumulating books, and I have my own studio now. But that gave me my start, so I'm really grateful for Tommy and for giving me a chance in that way.
That is absolutely wonderful. If you're looking for another book to read, everyone, There by Tommy Orange. Freaking amazing. It's got like multiple characters, and I'm definitely going to look into getting the audiobook for myself.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's really cool. So many great characters and voices, and yeah, it's really wonderful. Everyone does a wonderful job.
Speaking of other audiobooks, what other books have you read?
Well, there's we were just talking a little bit about this, but there's a cool well, first I'll start with one of my other favorites. I got to do an incredible book called The Only Good Indians, by Stephen Graham
Stephen Graham
Jones.
Jones.
Yeah, and he's a Blackfeet guy, and you know, um, in my dad's side of the family, that's we're Blackfeet as well, and so it was really cool to read that because I knew all the places in Browning that he was talking about, in Browning, Montana, where the Blackfeet Nation is, and he based it there. And he did this really cool thing of taking like a ceremony, like a scene of a sweat and a ceremonial scene, but then kind of adding a contemporary flavor to it by having the characters try to remember what the traditions had been, but having to contemporize it in a way to keep the traditions going. But it was just but it was a horror genre, and suspense and
Yeah,
thriller.
yeah.
And I had never read I had never thought of a native story in that way, like a Stephen King mix with Tommy Orange style, and Stephen has his own thing. But that was really fun, and an honor to be a part of that one. And then I did a cool Broadway book called Singular Sensation, because I come from,
Oh.
musical theater world too. So
Yeah.
Michael Riedel wrote that book. He's a theater critic who actually critiqued one of my mom's works back in the day. So she was laughing about that. Um, and I got to read about all those Broadway stories and flops and hits and what goes into producing a Broadway show. Um, yeah, and now I'm reading a rom-com book called To Sir with Love. I believe her name's Lauren Lane who wrote that. So it's a little bit of everything, you know?
So you mentioned that your mom's work was critiqued. So
Yeah.
is she also in the entertainment industry?
Yeah, she is. She started off as a dancer and
Okay.
became a choreographer. Well, she was always both, and now she's been directing for a while. And my mom actually choreographed the original Footloose. I never even told you that.
Oh wow.
Yes, the movie. And that was like,
Damn.
so when I was a little kid, I was really all up involved in that lifestyle and going to sets. And she took me to ballet classes and she was choreographing ballets. But her whole life, ever since she was 17, she's only been in the entertainment business. Through all the ups and downs and raising by herself, raising me with the help actually of my um, with my grandma. So it was the three of us all, and but most of my family were all somehow in the entertainment world. What about what about you? In your family, do you have other writers as well, or are you the writer in the family? Or
Actually, it's just me that kind of got into the theater and filmmaking and storytelling business. Everyone else in my family kind of has the more traditional career aspects. I actually got into theater first and foremost, way
oh,
back when I started out. Um, so I went to high school in the East Coast here in a boarding school called the Lakeville or Hotchkiss School in Lakeville, Connecticut, and one of the things I kind of got involved in was the theater side, and I really, really enjoyed telling stories in that medium because of that intimacy that it creates. And so I kind of got into the script writing aspect of theater, and one of my most favorite script writers was Sam Shepard. Yeah, so
that's
it's
like
mainly
me,
just
man.
been me in the entertainment industry, and I think for a lot of Navajos growing up on the res, like that's not really a viable career because on the res there's very little, if any, at theater at all, and most of the movies like you have to travel, at least in my hometown, like 30 minutes, 40 minutes to Gallup to see a movie. So
Yeah,
the idea of working and sustaining a livelihood in the entertainment industry doesn't it's not a viable option.
yeah. Wow, man, you're really breaking ground though, man, with this book and what you're gonna create. And it's incredible.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
um, any other plugs you want to include for projects that you are currently or have worked on, or other interesting books that you'd want to let people know about?
Yes. Actually, let's see. There's a cool book now um, called The Ice Lion that I'm reading, and I'm just going to because it's so new that I just started. I want to make sure I pronounce the author's name correctly. Um, so it's called The Ice Lion, and it's Kathleen O'Neill Gear. Um, so I'm really excited about that, and it's a sci-fi novel. Um, and it's cool doing sci-fi because you're like they just create new worlds and different ideas based on our own realities in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But that should be a really fun one. And other than that, yeah, just I got a couple of other books, but I don't know. I'm not sure if they want me to talk about them yet because they're so new. But I'm
Yeah,
excited to.
yeah.
One of them is one of them's a nonfiction, and uh, I go back and forth. I don't know what I like more. I have a feeling a little combo of fiction, but based on truth, and reality. And uh, nonfiction sometimes gets hard because there's so many technical and so much technical language that it usually takes a little bit longer to do, and you don't have as many voices you can jump in and out of. So it's
Yeah, yeah.
you have sometimes I'm like am I having enough variation in my voice? Is it interesting enough for people hearing this? But if you're interested in the material, then usually that comes across well. Um, but yeah, I have other projects, but they're so new I can't talk about them yet. I want to so badly, but some of them are in animation, and that's a cool feel to it.
Animation.
Yeah, and it's like heightened, voices and um, but books right now is my since the pandemic has been what I've been doing the most, which is great. Oh, I have a new but I'm also doing, being an actor, I'm doing a play with a theater company called Bedlam. And here in New York, we're going to film 4 nights of. Uh, Actually, we're filming for 4 nights, and then they're going to stream it live. But it's of Mary Stuart. So it'll be a cool. It's a classical piece, and I play like 5 different characters. Um, I play someone who guards Mary Stuart, the Queen of Scots, before she's executed, and it's this whole back and forth on should they or shouldn't they execute Mary Stuart, and
Yeah.
you know, I love having a wide variety of things to work on as I go.
Can you describe the process of producing an audiobook?
All right. So yeah, so basically how producing an audiobook usually begins with the publisher reaching out to the audio studio like Diné Audio, for example, or John Marshall Media, and they hire the voice actors. And so we get a book way in advance. We have to read the book. Usually we have to make a word list, all the words we don't know, because when I first started out, I didn't realize, what happens if you pronounce names wrong, which is not fun. And someone hears that, it's like horrible. So you have to do a lot of research beforehand. I'd say more, almost as much work goes into the research and preparation as the actual recording. So I make a whole list of words. Sometimes you have great authors like Brian who provide a glossary of words with the language that's in the book, and exactly spelled out. And then it usually takes about a week. And then you have great authors who also make pronunciation tapes for you, and like Brian did for me. And I have time to practice it, get the language in my body, talk to the author about it, um, find out all the research, and then go in prepared. I obviously read through the book once. I read Healer of the Water Monster probably like 2.5 times before I even went in there, because it was a really important book for me to understand all the different characters. And because there's so many voices, I recorded each voice as I went along. I recorded, you know, there's the holy beings in the book. And so I had to make a distinct voice for each holy being. The main character, Nathan, I had to find, okay, is it going to be my voice? Is that young enough? And then Nolly, Nathan's grandma, and trying to find that truthfulness to Nolly in my own voice, because she speaks a lot in the book. So I recorded all those. So when I sit down in the studio to record, we stop, we record until we hit a character that I want to listen to again. And I pull it up on my phone, I listen to it, get it in my body. And we have a great engineer. Actually, the engineer and the director weren't even in the recording studio with me in New York. They were recording remotely, and I could just hear their voices in my headphones. So I'm reading along, and sometimes you get lost in the story and you forget they're even listening. And that's the best thing. But sometimes when you have a hard passage that you're making a lot of mistakes, they jump into your ear, and they're like, oh, wait, you messed up there. And then, you have a little bit of that pressure. But I find that the pressure actually helps. It heightens the experience so that you kind of lift it up. You're not too relaxed into it. You're kind of on the edge of your seat. And the best times when it's really rolling, the story is just flowing. You don't even know you're reading, and you're kind of discovering the story as you're reading it. It's happening in the moment. And those are the best times. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, 10, 15 pages go by, and you're like, holy cow, how did that happen? Um, so anyway, that happens. And then you wait a few days and they call you up and give you a list of all the things you messed up. Like all the sentences you garbled, or sometimes you make up words. You're like, how did I even, you put like, and the, he, you just add things that aren't even in the text. And so you have to re-record those. And most importantly, for Healer of the Water Monster, we went over the language again, and you were able to be in on the session and help give me the example right before I did it, and that was incredible to have that. So um,
Yeah, I don't think that is the standard protocol
no, it's
in
not.
because we both you and I had to talk with my my publishing house, and I think you had to talk to your director, and we had to kind of make this argument of we want to make sure that the Navajo is as clean as possible, so
Yeah,
that way we respect the language. And I hope that sets a standard for when people who don't normally speak the native tongue will have a chance to learn the native tongue and be respectful of it.
yeah, for sure, for sure. And you know, it's a new time, and I think a new understanding to recognize how important it is to get the language as clean and clear as possible, um, for young people learning and hearing their language, but also to respect where the tradition and the years and years of maintaining that language, and but also for the very practical reason of maintaining the language, and so it was very
Yeah,
great that they helped facilitate that, and they were very they were receptive to that. It was wonderful, and I think it'll help set a standard hopefully going forward.
yeah, yeah. I think that's one of the reasons why I chose Heart Drum as my home, my publishing home for Healer, was that I always feel comfortable bringing up conversations like this with regards to representation of not only the characters but also of the language. What did you find most enjoyable about doing the voice acting for the Healer of the Water Monster?
Well, I just think there's so many unique voices, and when you're reading a book, you leave it up to the imagination. And I think it was so clear to me. uh, the holy beings gave me a chance to embody certain voices, but not necessarily always with your guidance, through your writing. It didn't always have to be the standard way that you would have to do something like darkness. While darkness is a powerful character, your immediate thing when you think of darkness, you're like, oh, it must be evil, but it's a complicated character, and it doesn't always have to be evil. And so I think I tried to capture that in my voice. But then there were other voices like the Spider family, and in one way, I thought, Grandfather Spider was a very he was a leader, but also jovial in a way, and it brought out a different side of my voice that I got to play with. And um, Pond, I got to this in this book. I really worked on rhythms of speech more than I have in other books, I think. So not having to have this like da 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 da, but like, oh, and I thought that we would do that, and I know that, so I had like a musicality in a way to some of the voices, and then pitching it. And there were also, interestingly enough, like the, I don't know, feminine, masculine energy that sometimes one didn't always have to be high pitched because it was feminine, or some of the, you know, it was cool to not have to be stuck in a like traditional structured way of like what we think of voices. So yeah, and there were just so many. There were so many. I didn't count, but um, then you have the mother water monster and going to that world, and her daughter, and so as we were going along, sometimes I would forget. Oh, I that's like one or two voices I didn't think about until we got to the actual part in the book, and so we had to like explore together in the moment, which is also fun. And then Jet, Nathan's uncle's voice, I picked a little rougher kind of voice, and so that was a good challenge. But it was like a raw type of thing, so sometimes it was like, it rubbed on my vocal cords, so I had to be careful not to burn out my cords doing that one. But then when you pick a voice, you have to stick with it for the whole book. But I loved doing Jet's voice. It gave me a chance to just explore a lot of different sides of myself, and that's what's fun about it. I love all the voices. It makes it the most challenging, but it's also makes it the most fun. You know?
Speaking of challenging,
Yeah.
what was the most challenging in this process, or challenging character to bring to life?
Mm. I think I'm trying to think which character. Well, I would say emotionally the hardest was Jet. It wasn't like technically whatever. Everything's gonna have a different type of challenge, but he was a little challenging technically because, like I was saying, it's lower my register, but and like raw, a little raw. But I think emotionally that was the hardest one. I'm getting a little because of his journey, and
Yeah, yeah.
there's so many things in this book, and one of the things I always the misconception is that young people can't handle, they don't know what's going on. Maybe they can't process it, but they know what's going on, and I think adults oftentimes, like you say in the book, it's like they try to hide it and sugarcoat it, but in a way that doesn't always help. And I think Jet just brings a storyline that's like right in your face and raw, but it's a real thing, and people go through it, and they need ceremonial help, but they need more than that as well. But what happens, that's the coolest part of the book for me, is that I'm not going to give anything away, but you see things in the spirit world and what we go through in our world, which is kind of like it's all one. They're all part of the same thing, but I think you see the holy beings going through a vulnerable process at the same time you're seeing the humans in the story going through a vulnerable process, and Nathan gets to kind of see both of those and glide between the two of those. And so yeah, it's big stuff. It's a young reader's book, but I think adults will love it. I think families will love it. I think it's important for communities to read this, to hear this. Um, it's empowering, and people going through stuff in their lives can identify with it. People who are also seeing other people going through stuff in their lives. So I think there's a lot of, you see some aspect of whatever you're going through in your life. You see that in this book. So hopefully the emotion translates. That's what, when I'm going through it as I read, then I know it'll be happening on the other end. But the hard part is staying in character, because there's so many voices. You're like, oh man. And sometimes I dropped out of character because I was so in it. And then if I start saying the language, the Navajo language, and they're like, oh, you didn't say it in the character voice. Um, so melding all those things together was such a good challenge.
Did you have a favorite scene in the book? This is more for my vainglorious self.
Yeah, it's I hope I don't say too much, but it's like there are two, but the enemy way ceremony amongst the, or no, the well, that was one of them, but the assessment, but I'm saying it wrong. I said that last time. What's that called again?
Oh god,
Now I'm putting you on
complete
the spot.
brain fart right now. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's when first turkey
Yeah, first turkey, you have
diagnosis of.
thank you. Yeah, because you have all of these incredible holy beings there, very powerful, and at first you only meet a few, and then all of a sudden Nathan is there with Pond, who's ill, and they're trying to diagnose Pond, and you have all these characters: Darkness, Pond, First Turkey, Seed Gatherer, um, Nathan. There's a few others. I think Moon might be there, and I'm trying to think of. Okay. I'm forgetting the twins' names now. But they're there. And so all these powerful beings are there trying to figure out what's going on. And then through Nathan's history and incredible research, he realizes, oh, I think, well, I'm not going to get away. But anyway,
Yeah.
you find out, you connect both of the worlds, like, is my favorite thing, and you start to see similar ceremonial behavior in the spirit amongst the holy beings that mirrors what the humans do. And it boom, it blew my mind, because I was like, I immediately got grounded with some of the ceremonial things that I learned and I've heard of. And like, oh, where does this come from? I don't know. People just, but then it's like, oh, they're actually mirroring what the holy beings do, which is why it's so sacred, and why things happen a certain way, and songs have to be sung a certain way, and why you can't mention a holy being's name and just call them up. I just learned so much in that moment, but it was through story and through narrative. And um, also because I had to jump back through so many it was one of the harder scenes to voice, because I was like jumping back between different, and the voices are so distinct that I was like, oh no, I think I jumped into, I would say a line. I was like, no, that was seed, that was first turkey. And I said it as seed gatherer, which sounds ridiculous. So I had to like go back and make sure all the voices were right. But that was one of my favorite scenes, and the tension of that moment, and finding out what was wrong and connecting it to the human, how the human world connects, or this world connects to the other worlds in the story. That was made it very clear for me. Yeah.
For someone wanting to get into voice acting, what advice do you have to share?
Well, I think it's having fun with this is so important, and learning the technical aspect, even if it's on your phone. I think if you hear a voice somewhere on the radio, in the street, just take your phone and record it. Not while the person's there, but like try to find a private moment and record it, and come up with all these different voices, and then make a sample. Find some of your, even something from this, or if you have a favorite book, take 5 pages and record yourself reading it with the different voices, and you have a sample. And then you can, so much of what I do is word of mouth. It's like, oh, you should
Yeah.
check out my friend. You should check out my friend's reel, or put them on your roster. And then I will pass along, it's getting to know people, but it's saying, hey, will you check out my reel? But having a good sample. So once you have a sample on your phone, or even if you have the material and you have the voices, I would say either get it professionally recorded, so you have like a professional reel of like 3 different samples, or have a friend who has a home studio, or get a mic and plug it into your computer and somewhere really quiet and make your own sample. I think just creating content and having something that represents your style and what you can do with voices, and being ready for the opportunity. So when you meet someone like you or me, or someone in the business, you're like, oh, do you mind just taking a listen, give me some feedback? It might be exactly, I got a job one time because I just sent my reel to someone. They were like, oh, we happen to be looking for a young voice. Do you want to do this? Do you want to be part of this book? Just because I said, hey, would you mind checking this out? And I think that's a really good plan. Also, taking classes at DN Audio gives um, audiobook classes or voiceover classes, and just being open to any workshops that you hear about. Hopefully, there's more opportunities wherever we all are. I know my theater company, Native Voices at the Autry, is so incredible to get involved with. They're going to do a radio play coming up, which is going to be amazing. But a lot of it is word of mouth. A lot of it is just like knowing people who are doing it, and reaching out and say, hey, I love this. I want to get involved. Can you help me out? You know, what was it like trying to take some of the stories, which I know you mentioned, some are it's easier to tell some than others, but putting your spin on it, or your interpretation on that story. What is the I guess is what I know, I'm trying to phrase it in a way that's like, why do you do that? Is it something to do with the other generations kind of interpreting it for themselves, for the world we live in now, and just like, what was your process with doing that, and why did you choose to do that, I guess?
What was my process of combining the traditional and the contemporary worlds together?
Yeah, I guess that, and also, why do you want to do that?
Well, why is a very simple question. Um, that's just who I am. A mixture of both traditional and contemporary. I
Yeah.
still pray with Khadadeen in the mornings over here in Brooklyn. But another, you've heard this phrase so many times from my mouth. But growing up, um, the traditional and the contemporary were never thought as separate entities, but instead together. Because I was constantly going to school and then on the weekends going to ceremonies, and then some of the stories that I was told in the ceremonies were reinforced at school between me and my friends that would participate in those ceremonies. Um, so just the idea that the traditions and the old way of doing things and the Western world being oil and water, no,
Mm.
it's for me at least, it's a lot easier because I was able to grow up on my homelands, and my cat is kind of moving the table, and see those stories and those lessons in action. And my grandma, whenever we would herd our cows, we drive through this back road. I forget where it was, but it was somewhere in Nazlini. But she would point to this mound and say that was where a certain holy being um, did an action. And I'm not going to say more than that because of the concepts of not saying the
Mm-hmm.
holy name out loud. But she would always say that's where that happened, and if you put like a quarter down, you'll be blessed with money. So every once in a while, if we had time, we would stop by there and put like a coin or like a dollar at the base and pray a little bit and ask for money. So the idea that these stories were alive and still a part of today was very much ingrained in me.
Okay.
So when I was writing Heel of the Water Monster, that was just a natural extension of that ideology of, you know, the mythologies and the holy beings are still present and have always been in our lives. It's just that another concept in Navajo is that the older you get, the less connection you have to the holy beings. So with Navajos, we celebrate the the infant's first laugh. So after a child is born, um, it is believed that holy beings are kind of like hanging around the kid to make sure that the kid is happy and healthy. And then once that kid learns to laugh, that's when the holy beings start to kind of take step back because the kid, to be able to laugh, has to have intelligence, has to feel loved, has to feel safe. And so it's an indicator of all these things and is a sign for the holy beings to say, okay, these people know what they're doing, so we're going to take a step back from the kid. And then the more kind of milestones that the kid faces, the more steps the holy beings step back until you fully hit puberty, with this traditionally you're viewed as an adult. So that was kind of the reason why I have Nathan also be 11 and at that stage where he is still pretty much a young kid, but also able to start doing things in his environment and
Yeah.
seeing and recognizing things, not just the holy beings.
Is there I know you're also you're a film writer, right? I mean, do you are you are you going to stay in this world for a little bit now? Are you going to also continue to work in all worlds? Do you have time to do any of that? Because I know this takes a lot of time.
It does. It does. It's just a matter of balancing and not having a life whatsoever.
Yeah, right.
But honestly, it depends on the story.
Yeah,
And for this particular story, I initially envisioned it as a movie.
I can see that.
but
Yeah,
but yeah, so the whole thesis, the whole idea came to me when I was working in Albuquerque as a meat cutter. This is also in my author's note, which you should read.
that's
And yeah, I just had this dream where a young Navajo kid was playing video games, and then he just stops and runs out into the desert and sings a song with a lizard, and then it starts raining. Initially, I was in the filmmaking industry, and I was already producing a bunch of projects at the time. I actually had written several feature lengths that I was pitching to studios and production companies, but I was constantly being met with this idea that native stories don't sell, or that there is no market for Indian stories or with an Indian protagonist, and that kind of pissed me off. So when I was starting to really kind of condense the storyline and figure out how to get to that point where a boy runs out into the desert to sing a song with the lizard, I realized that if I was going to go into the film route, I was going to be going up against those same roadblocks of this is a great idea, but it's an Indian story, quote unquote. And I didn't want that. I was constantly banging my head against the wall trying to get my other projects completed, and I just didn't want to have to do that all over again. And then I decided to go a kind of long roundabout way
Mhm.
of writing a book and then kind of demonstrating that there is a market. And if I don't turn it into a movie, hopefully someone else will. But I would love for it to be me.
Yeah, yeah.
But so that's the kind of overarching goal, is to first and foremost demonstrate and dispel that racist idea that native stories don't sell and that there's no market for it, because there is. There
Oh
is. And
yeah,
the reason why natives aren't watching the quote unquote dribble that they're marketing as native content is because it's from white people. It's from their
yeah,
perspective. It's not from ours. It's not
yeah.
from our perspective. All right, everyone. This is Brian signing off. Go on that.
All right, everyone. This is Shaun signing off. Hagone.
Not bad.